my wonderful students. Today we're going to talk about atmospheric perspective. So you need to take out your Cornell notes and write this as the title of the lesson. And the essential question is, how do you create a monochromatic landscape using atmospheric perspective? Once again, the title of the lesson is Atmospheric Perspective, and the essential question is, how do you create a monochromatic landscape using atmospheric perspective? So there are two names for atmospheric perspective. It is also known as aerial perspective. We'll go more into that in just a little bit. Yeah, write that down. So what is it? It is the illusion of depth in a painting or drawing by modifying the color to simulate changes affected by the atmosphere on the colors of things seen at a distance. You need to write this down in your Cornell notes. So what happens with atmospheric perspective is the details start fading away as things go further off into the distance. Write it down. Contrast becomes muted. We talked a lot about contrast in the previous lessons. So you don't see as many sharp darks and lights. It becomes more muted. A blue mist descends when you have atmospheric perspective. Sharply focused shapes tend to be advanced, while blurred shapes tend to recede. Write it down, please. It is one of the simplest ways to create the illusion of space. So here is an example of atmospheric perspective. Contrast fades, a blue mist descends, details fade away also, so you can see a lot of details right here and right here. But as you go further, you can't see any windows. And it creates this illusion of space. Here's another example, old picture of atmospheric perspective. As it goes off into the distance, the details fade. Here's a picture I took in Flüelen, Switzerland. You can see that there's a lot of detail on the rocks and the trees in the foreground, and as you go further back, things get lighter and more faded. The blue mist descends. Here's another one from Cinque Terre, Italy. One of the most beautiful places on this planet. You can see the atmospheric perspective back behind here. Our own Leonardo da Vinci first used the term aerial perspective in his Treatise of Painting book. You need to write this down in your Cornell notes. Here's a picture. Leonardo was intrigued by the atmosphere and by its effect on the colors and distinctness of distinct objects. Though other artists had already begun to mimic the influence of the atmosphere, he was the first to make careful measurements and suggest rules for applying them realistically. Please write this information down in your Cornell notes. This is a picture that Leonardo da Vinci painted when he was 22. It's called Ginevra de' Benci, and it is the only piece, Da Vinci piece, that is in America. So if you go to Washington, D.C., and you go to the Portrait Gallery, this is the only Da Vinci piece we have in America. And if you look closely, there is aerial perspective. His writing showed that he approached the questions much as a scientist would, using what he knew about optics and the makeup of the atmosphere to formulate his hypothesis. Leonardo recognized that the atmosphere surrounding the Earth was composed of moisture and dust as well as air. The further away an object was, he reasoned, the more the moisture and dust would reflect light from it. Please write this information down in your Cornell notes. You can summarize it in your own words. So, moving on to the assignment. The assignment is to create a monochromatic landscape that creates atmospheric perspective and includes tints and shades. We've talked about tints and shades and we've talked about monochromatic, but I'm going to go over them just one more time for a review. So what is monochromatic? Here's a video.
Give me a word. Any word, and I show you how the root of that word is Greek. Okay? How about arachnophobia?
Here. I just thought it was funny. So, from the Greek word monos, meaning alone or one. So the first part of that word means alone or one. The second part, chromatic, from the Greek word chromatikos, meaning color. So if you put those two together, it is one color that incorporates tints and shades. One color that incorporates tints and shades. So the very first thing you're going to do is we're going to review about brushes and paints, making sure you wash out your brushes incredibly well. You should be checking off your brushes every time you use them. Make sure they are clean after you use them. Make sure you do not waste a lot of paint. Nothing is more frustrating than a student that has huge globs of paint. Just be careful when you're pouring the paint. And if you get too much, share with a neighbor. Here's some more examples of your assignment. So what you're going to do is you're going to mix one color. One color. I want you to mix a tertiary color, and we've talked about what tertiary means. I want you to mix a tertiary color and add in tints and shades, so lights and darks, to the one color. Okay, you're not making multiple colors for this assignment. Doing one color. So this student had an orange, and as she went further off into the distance, she added more white. And as she came closer to the foreground, there's more detail, and it's darker. Okay. Same with these ones right here. You start with one color, go lighter, and then darker. One color. I do want you to try to mix a color. I don't want you to get the color straight out of the tube of paint. I want you to try to mix a color. The next step is picking a picture or landscape or cityscape. I want you to use this as a guide. I don't want you to just copy straight from the picture, but make it your own. So this has some really pretty atmospheric perspective in it. Same with this one. If you want a little more complicated, you could do a cityscape. Step 2 is drawing your landscape on heavy painter paper. Draw lightly, please. So that way your pencil marks don't show through when you paint. Then you're going to pick and mix your color. Remember, I want you to try to mix a color, tertiary or a secondary color. Don't just get blue, red, or yellow right out of the tube. I want you to mix a cool color. Okay, start painting the main landscape and then paint the foreground and then the background and add in white to the background and black shades to the foreground. Here's a good example how there's a lot of detail in the foreground and then no detail at all in the background. And it gets lighter as it goes further back and gets darker as it gets closer to us. Here's another student example. And then here's another student example. Okay, this student, he tried to create atmospheric perspective. He got the darks and a little bit of the light, but I'm not sure what he was putting in this to make it look like it had some foreground, but make sure that you are putting in tints and shades, and I can see the landscape or the picture that you are doing very clearly. So that is the next assignment. Have so much fun. Make sure you are cleaning your brushes out well and not wasting paint, and enjoy.